slides actually comes from the RCMP when they did the presentation on called Police Situational Awareness Syrian Refugees. And I think it's really interesting to note that the RCMP is an example of a non-traditional partner, something that I mentioned this morning with a question that was asked. When you think about, in the settlement process, quite often, like Mei Ling mentioned, a lot of people are fearful of authorities, people of authorities such as the police. And having such partnership with the RCMP is really important because it allows the community to connect with the RCMP. And by connecting with the RCMP, okay, it makes them comfortable to contact, people of authorities, law enforcement when there is a need. Right? It's really important that they feel comfortable to contact them when there is a need, or when they're, in reverse, when the legal authorities have a need to contact them, that they don't feel fearful that they're going to be persecuted for whatever reasons that they may have happened in their past countries. So one of the things that the RCMP has done is they're trying to make themselves more accessible. They've created coloring sheets for children. They have offered to do field trips for people to show how their office, the precinct looks like. So they want to connect to the community. They're also trying to, be available to talk to the community to create that better relationship. And as we're going to be later on doing mapping, where we're going to see what type of resources are out there, and we're going to probably notice, you'll probably notice there are some gaps that's out there. And looking at that non-traditional partnership, and I can give you some examples of non-traditional partnerships. For example, with ISS of BC, when the Syrian refugees came were arriving, or we knew they would be arriving, and we put a call out for a variety of supports with the community. We received a lot of phone calls and actual material donations, so clothing, people offering furniture, pots, pans, everything. There's a lot of offers. Now, and as an organization that doesn't typically receive so much donations, we don't have the warehouse, the capacity to organize, sort, take care of those things. So one of the things we had was a partnership with the Muslim Food Bank and the BC Muslim Association for them to take care of the material donations. So we would refer people to those associations. They had the warehouse, they had the capacity to organize, to sort out the materials, and also distribute it, not only at the temporary housing, but also in permanent accommodations when people moved on. And that was one of the things that I suggested in another training program, another training where they were asking what to do with material donations because they didn't have the capacity. Another example of a non-traditional partnership was looking, we were approached by faith-based groups who in the past had provided privately sponsored supports to privately sponsored refugees. And they had approached us and said, would it be possible for us to actually somehow work together? And what happened is we were able to work together where we had government-assisted refugees, and before they moved into permanent housing, they were supported by the faith-based groups who typically supported privately sponsored refugees. And this actually provided support where I think one of the questions was what happens in that transition with resettlement and the settlement part is that this is another form of partnership where they were able to be supported by another group in connection with receiving settlement services with settlement serving providers as well. So I think it's really important for us to sort of look at different partnerships or organizations or people who might be able to be helping the large number of refugees, given the capacity, given what's out there, and hopefully be able to fill some of the gaps. So the RCMP would be one of the examples. So the next couple of slides, like I said, came from the RCMP, and they, a little bit about the Syria country. So Syria has an area of about almost 200,000 square feet, and its population is a little bit under 21 million. The official language is Arabic, and in this slide, this says the literacy rate is 77%. In another resource, I saw that the literacy rate is 64%. Regardless of the number, it's a fairly high literacy rate. In the other resource, it says men were 78% literacy, had literacy rate of 78%, and women were 51%. Prior to the pre-war, Syria was actually a model of education in the Middle East. And that was because primary education was mandatory, and it was free as well. Many have social media skills, and as much of you are probably aware, those who are under 30 are very tech savvy, and even those who are older are also very comfortable with email and social media. And you must have heard or seen, a lot of them are using WhatsApp to connect back with family, friends in Syria, or even just finding out what's happening, but also to connect with other Syrian refugees who are throughout Canada and throughout, the city, the province. They're all very connected. The religion primarily is, it's multidimensional, but primarily Muslim majority, where they are from the Sunni branch of Islam, but there are minorities as well. They have Christians, they have some Jewish Arabs, ethnic Kurds. The industry, petroleum, textile, food processing, and beverages. So with the Syrian crisis, so one of the things is to understand, note that the data here is based on the data indicated. So 1 in 5 Syrian refugees, 1 in 5 Syrians are now refugees in a neighboring country. And there are 6.5 million internally displaced people. So again, meaning people who have moved or left from their home city to another city or another province, but within Syria as well. And when we talk about neighboring countries, almost 2.2 million have gone to Turkey, 1.1 in Lebanon, and about 500,000 in Jordan. The Syrian crisis. So as Minister McCallum has said, the Syrian refugees are victims of the worst refugee crisis in decades. And just to give you a sense, so the Office of Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs of UN said that more than half the Syrians have been forced to leave their homes, often multiple times, making them the largest displacement crisis globally. And when you look at Afghanistan over a period of 1979 to 2015, it was 2.6. Iraq in 1991 was 1.4 million people displaced. So who are the Syrian newcomers? They are victims of war in need of protection, women, children, elderly, and complete families. They have undergone robust and multi-layered security and health screening, which Mei Ling had described yesterday when they arrived to Canada. The next 2 slides are observations that the RCMP saw when they were deployed to Jordan between January 7th to 2016. And I think these are very, a lot of us who have worked with them, with the Syrians, have seen some of these profiles. So many of them have experienced traumatic events in Syria and have lived in harsh living conditions as refugees in neighboring countries. They're fearful of the unknown in Canada and saddened that they had to abandon their relatives, family, friends, and the familiarity of life in Syria. And we often hear sometimes, stories of where some families have decided that they did not want the opportunity to come to resettle in a different country because they want to be staying close to Syria. They wanted to have the opportunity to be, maybe possibly go home one day, but at least be close to family and friends, or be somewhere where they're familiar with. Many intend to work hard and become productive members of society. And we see that very often. While they were staying in the temporary hotels, quite often we heard them over and over saying, we want to work, we want to work. So there was a sense of urgency on their part to work, even though they haven't found permanent housing, even though they haven't really settled. They're hopeful for a safe life and a better future for their children in a country that does not discriminate against them. Once in Canada, their priority are their basic needs: food, shelter, healthcare, finding work, and schooling for their children. So in addition to what the RCMP observed, I'm going to just provide some general cultural information that I have as well. I want to make sure that I really emphasize this is general information, okay? General cultural information. It does not mean that all Syrian refugees are going to be like this. They could vary because of urban areas, rural areas. Even within urban or rural areas, there's different ideals, differences. As Mei Ling mentioned this morning, also values with each person may differ. But just wanted to give you sort of a bit of understanding that may help with understanding certain behaviors. And again, this does not justify behaviors. I think one of the most important things that Mei-Ling said about cultural competency is being curious as well. Because certain behaviors, though we may say it's culture, there may be other aspects of it. They may be experiencing mental health where their behavior might be stemming from PTSD. Or it might be what Kirby said, that window of tolerance, where they might be hyper-aroused or they're hypo-aroused. So depending on where they are in that window of tolerance, it may also affect behaviors. And so being curious, asking questions, about certain things, is important. But this hopefully will give you some understanding of some of the cultural backgrounds. So food, like many culture, is very important. It's a way not only to show courtesy, but also a way to show friendship. So gifts of food, dishes they cook, even, that is not uncommon, and they share it often. I know that when we were working in the hotel, quite often, with little that they had, they would offer us platters of food as a way of showing appreciation and wanting us to, to say we're happy and we want to show, they're happy with the work that we do. Communication. Prior to the war, they were tolerant of diversity, religious belief, and interfaith marriage was not very uncommon. However, with the current situation, it's brought about new tension. Some distrust and communication may be strained between Syrians of different faith and sects. So being aware of that as well. Okay. Men engage in banter quite often, and they like to sort of one-up each other with wit and eloquent insults. But also the culture, the communication can be very animated, can be very lively. And then as an outsider, it seems like they're fighting or arguing. And they may be or they may not, right? One of the things also, like what I found was quite often I hear one person would say something, another would interrupt and say another point, and they kept on interrupting and be new persons sharing new information. Okay? Again, they may be arguing, they may not. And depending on the type of supports you're providing, it might be necessary to inform a third party who may not be aware of the way of communication. Again, this does not discount the need if it's, for example, a visit by the ministry, social services. It does not discount the visit by social services, but that explanation may be useful for them. As well as for people who have the same culture as well. Being aware that, it's always tempting because you're part of that culture to be involved in that, discussion. But standing back, letting them share their thoughts and feelings. And I don't know if it's because I'm not from the same cultural background, but what I found was often giving them the space to share their frustration. At the end of it, despite whatever the situation was, the thing they say was thank you. Because all they wanted was to be listened to. So not being involved in that discussion as well, but stepping back, letting them share their thoughts and feelings. Greeting holds significance and can be significant discussion about health. Okay? Handshakes, sometimes hugs and kisses on the cheek are common. Of course, it's more common between the same gender, more so than boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, and wife. And sometimes putting the right hand over the heart is a sign of affection when meeting somebody. Children, prior to war, including girls who were, before they reached puberty, were given a lot of freedom to play unsupervised. So often they would be playing out wherever they are, out on the streets, out in the parks, without the supervision of parents. And we saw this in the hotels as well. Quite often, the children were playing on the roads, playing in the fitness gym, maybe near swimming pools. And our role was to educate them, to make them understand that they had to be supervised. How things are done here in Canada, the rules, the way we perceive childcare is they have to be supervised. And so understanding that, that unsupervision may not be neglect. It might be just part of cultural and having to educate. But having said that, one of the comments in one of the readiness training that I did mentioned that the mother said, I just let my children out play because even when there was bombing in Syria, because life here is not great. Just living, there's no point in living, so I just let them play by themselves. Now, that requires someone to actually look into it and may require a report to duty. So that's where curiosity is very important. Because culturally they do allow people to play unsupervised, But when you hear a comment like that, don't discount it and think, well, you know, it's typical, children are playing unsupervised. It may require a bit more investigation, and it may require a duty to report. And that's where the curiosity is important. Non-related adults can scold and interact with children without the parents present. Again, that's where it differs with how we do things here in Canada. For example, when we have any activities, we have to have a childminder who follows the rules and regulations that's required for a childminder. That is very different for some of the parents, where anybody can take care of the children. So having that understanding as well that, you know, no, we can't really leave the children with your friends unless, you know, or with one of our staff who are not childminders, so that you can come to a workshop with us. Unfortunately, we cannot do that. Okay, so having them understand some of the differences. Family. Urban women tended to work outside, and rural traditional families less likely had women who worked. The girls kept the household, traditional families, the girls kept the households, and the boys typically found part-time jobs or helped the father or the men in the family with certain businesses. The girls tended to supervise younger siblings, and boys may have had the duty to supervise the girls. Okay. Again, traditional rural families, it's not saying it's across the board. Girls were likely to marry at a young age. Men and women socialized separately unless it's a family event. And I think we tended to see sometimes that happening as well. When we had certain activities in the hotels, one gender tended to be more predominant. So I know in one of the hotels they were having conversation circles or sort of English groups. And it tended to be more the females, the women who were attending the workshops. The men tended not to show up. That again may be something to think about when you're looking at programming or supports that you're doing. How to utilize to attract the attention of, you know, each group. Families centered on extended families, and less so with urban centers. Older males, fathers or grandfathers, have the authority who make decisions typically. And again, that's sort of what I observed as well in the hotels, was that those who came to ask questions, to find out more about their housing, to find out questions about forms or anything, tended to be more male. There were some females, but I think it tended to be more male-dominated who were asking questions, finding out more information to make some of these decisions. Children are valued, and the more children there is in the family, it's considered a blessing. The mother and son, typically the older son has a strong bond. In terms of values, there's emphasis on honesty, purity, and responsibility through strong work ethics. Respect for elders is important and sometimes enforced. Scolding is commonly used for guidance. Domestic violence is not illegal in Syria, and physical discipline for children is acceptable. So just some things to sort of think about in terms of when you're working with the Syrian refugees, some of the differences, how to interact and how to sort of programming and supports that you provide. So I just thought I'd open it up a little bit and see sort of what are some of your observations through some of the work that you've started doing with the Syrian refugees. And they may be different from what I've explained and what I've observed, and it may be the same. So just wanted to open up to see what others have seen or experienced or wanted to comment.
Just to encourage others to speak, I can testify actually to most of what you have said, if not all actually, that being actually from Syria, I have lived like most of my life in Syria, and like quite a good time in North America right now. So I can appreciate both, and I can see the differences. And actually, this is very important what you just said actually, because like coming from that part of the world to this part of the world, sometimes actually we don't get to understand what's going on with those people. But when we know the background and we start actually like walking them through actually the new life here in Canada, I believe they are capable and they can actually be the most of what they can be actually like with some time. They are giving the opportunity and the time to change. So talking, for example, about the domestic violence, this is, I think, a big thing here in Canada. To them, actually, I mean, lived actually in the society where these kind of things are acceptable to some extent. So yeah, we need to bring to their attention that this is something is not acceptable here, and we need to walk them through the process and help them out, rather than just being judgmental. Actually, yeah, we need to understand where are they coming from.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that's actually really important to also acknowledge it as well, and through acknowledging, be able to sort of inform individuals of how it's different. Yeah.
What I found working with some refugee families, that female, like wives, are strong. They have strong personalities, and you know, they have a say in the family, and it, you know, like the husband and the kids listen. So I don't know if this is only the families, you know, coming here, or but they are educated, and it's a different level of education, let's say. The other thing is, I agree with my colleagues here. Parenting is challenging for not only for refugees, not only for Syrians. It's for everybody coming, because there is the challenge of like the generation gap and the culture gap. They don't know how to discipline otherwise, other than spanking. And the other side, they don't know the rights, because sometimes you know, with social media now, the kids come here and they have this idea, oh, it's a free country, so I can do whatever I want. And sometimes the parents will say, okay, you know, but they have rights, and they need to be educated about both ways.
Yeah, and I agree. I think the education is really important. I think informing to inform the information of how things are done, but also collaboration. I think it's really important that we all work with different groups. I mean, even if you're a settlement worker, to work with the schools, to work with, you know, if there's a need for mental health, whatever, you know, I think it's really a collaboration. It's not in isolated as an organization or the type of role that you do. I think it's sort of that collaboration where people are providing information of different viewpoints, and sort of with the same goal in the end. I think is going to be really important. Yeah. So really thank you for sort of sharing and engaging in that. I think there's a lot of things that are very complex, and really does require more discussions, I think more looking into more in depth, but just wanted to sort of bring it up to have sort of a discussion like this, because there's so much depth to it that there's no easy right answer or wrong answer, or it's because of this reason or because of that reason. And so just really wanted to have that thought process of, you know, the depth of it, the complexity of it, to bring it up about, because we are dealing with people and their human lives, and very, very different variations of it. And so being able to sort of have that, you know, bit of understanding, or bit of sort of, you know. So I'm going to move into something that's more technical. It's going to be more about statistics. Just to give you a sense of how many Syrian refugees who have arrived, between November 4th, 2015 and March 1st, 2016, just to give you some data of the number of Syrian refugees arriving to Canada, it was over 26,000, and about 9%, 2,200, I think, 2,329 who arrived in BC. In this graph, you're able to see the difference between government-assisted refugees, BVARs, blended visa office referrals, and privately sponsored refugees. In the past, we may not have been able to get some of this detail because the BVARs were sometimes mixed into the government-assisted refugees data. So since this fall, we've been able to distinguish the three different data. In terms of the Syrian refugees in British Columbia, again, same time period, sorry. The graph is utilizing the provincial refugee response team boundaries, which means, for example, Fraser Valley includes Surrey, Delta, Pitt Meadows, and Maple Ridge. You can see that Vancouver right now has about 45.1% of the Syrian refugees. Just to note a little bit about Metro Vancouver, some of them, with this number, because it's as of March 1st, some of the Syrian refugees were still in temporary housing, so this number probably will have changed quite substantially. We see about 35.4% have moved on to the Fraser Valley, and then interior about 5.4%, and Vancouver Island 11%, and the north is about 2.2%. Just a bit about the profiles. About 1,800 Syrian GAR refugees arrived to British Columbia. Now, we're able to go into depth of some of the information with the government-assisted refugees because, like I mentioned yesterday, we at ISS of BC, because we are contracted to provide resettlement assistance program, we know where the government-assisted refugees, when they arrive, we know where they're settling, we have details about the family. With the privately sponsored refugees and sometimes the BVORs, we don't necessarily have that information. We know where they're destined to, we know they're coming to BC or certain area regions, but it does not necessarily mean they're going to be settling there. As well as we don't have the mechanisms or tool to actually profile the family in terms of the age group or details as listed out here. So you can see that about 60% of the GARs, government-assisted refugees, were 18 and younger. Okay? So that youth programming that was mentioned earlier is going to be fairly important because you're going to have a lot of youth who are needing that extra support. Whether it's homework programs, whether it's youth programs, youth leadership programs, so something to be really considering in the next couple of years or even right now. You can see the breakdown of the age groups. 24% are 0 to 6 years old, about 26% is 6 to 12, and 11% are 13 to 19 years old. Okay. They are large families, and I think we've heard a lot of that. They are large families. Average size is about 6 people. And it can go up to 13 members in a family. Most Syrian GAR adults have completed some school, maybe about an average grade of 5 to 7. Most adults have literacy in Arabic, but their English and French is limited. For the government-assisted refugees, we found that about 5% have some English or French. Post-training or work experience have been farmers, laborers, construction help hands, and some of them will have physical and visible impairments. Again, these are the government-assisted refugees. The privately sponsored refugees might have slightly different profiles. Some of the things that we've heard with the privately sponsors that we are aware of is they tend to be a little bit smaller families. Not all, but some of them are smaller families. Some of them have a bit more English. They're able to communicate bare, simple conversations. And some of them may have professional backgrounds. So just to give you a sense, the Syrian refugees in Metro Vancouver, and this is from a period of November 4th to May 10th, 2016. You'll notice that the number of Syrian refugees who have settled in 8 communities, you'll notice that it's a range. One of the reasons why it's a range is because IRCC, if the number of Syrian refugees who have settled somewhere is 5 or less, they actually do not disclose this number. And this is to protect, to keep it confidential in terms of how many people have settled in that region. So what we've done is we've decided to use the number 1 to 5 in order to have an estimate. So 61 are BVORs, 163 to 166 are privately sponsored refugees, and 478 are government-assisted refugees. And there are about 138 to 147 PSRs that are in inventory. What this means is that they have been named, they're overseas, but they're waiting to come over. So they're still overseas waiting to arrive to Canada. So then, what I'll do is I will turn it over to Salim from Mosaic. He's going to give us a bit of a background and update on the Metro Vancouver RR team in terms of update and their action plan.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you very much for coming today, and thank you, Jennifer, for the introduction and for the useful information. It's always impressive when we talk about refugees because we tend, even though we are expert in the field working with refugees and immigrants, but we tend to lump them together sometimes, and we have to understand that refugees come from all different backgrounds and all sort of education level and experience, and I myself came to Canada as a refugee. I'm either fortunate or unfortunate that I came from the Middle East, and I'm Kurdish from a minority group. I have the, I can speak Arabic and Kurdish, and it helps me a lot with my work. either working with refugees or trying to understand and to try to look for some of the cultural backgrounds and the different practices that have been happening. But today my focus is on a totally different thing. I was really excited when Mosaic became the lead organization for the Metro Vancouver refugee response team. Thanks to the province of BC with their funding, we are working with Metro Vancouver one. So if you look for the area that we cover, of course we are excited not only about that, but our organization is turning 40 years old this year. We are celebrating our 40th anniversary, which is a big milestone. So for us, the area that we cover for the purpose of this project, we have the, it's a little bit different from what we are used to. Normally, Tuason, for example, is an area attached to Delta, and it's normally part of the Fraser Valley, but for the purpose of this project, we cover areas of Burnaby, New Westminster, North Shore, Richmond, Tri-Cities, and of course Tuason is with it as well. As we develop our project and provide our activities, we further divided this into three, or lumped them together into three groups: Burnaby, New West, and Vancouver. Because of the proximity, normally some of the activities and actions identified would be lumped together. Tri-Cities would be on its own, North Shore would be one, Richmond, Tuason, the activities that we offer would be provided there. So for us, in the course of, during March, we got our approval on March 2nd, and we had until March 23rd to come up with an action plan. Within our action plan, we had about 35 representatives from 35 stakeholders, including sectors like education, health, community services, employment. We all got together to try to identify some of the action plan for Metro Vancouver. And one of the things that were identified was the public education and information collection was one of the major ones. And for us, in order to be able to do the work, it was identified that for each of the action plans, action items, we would have a working group to provide guidance and direction in the collection of information and how the action would be implemented. So for us, when we took the information to members of the who attended the consultations, they identified that there is a need for us to have information specific to Metro Vancouver. And by having information specific to that, we felt that there is a need, and members who were in the team felt that there is a need for us to have a microsite, which would be to gather all of the information about the communities that we will cover for Metro Vancouver. We will have a communication plan of how we will collect data and information, how information would be distributed, what sort of information would be collected based on the guidance and the direction of the working group. The microsite would not be a duplicate of the information or whatever is available already out there, but it will kind of be specific to Metro Vancouver, with all of the information available on the site would be fed to the Refugee Readiness Hub operated by ISS of BC, so that's kind of the idea. And for us, we will try to collect, with the website, it will include information such as frequently asked questions based on our work and based on the questions that we receive as the lead organization for Metro Vancouver from private sponsors, potential volunteers, community groups, and refugees themselves. We will also have terminologies explained there. We would have, we will try to post and promote promising practices, and we will share success stories about what's happening, either the work with refugees or success stories from refugees themselves. What we will try to do is to leverage on the training provided today, is to provide some training to private sponsors and potential volunteers. So that could be something else, and we will try to cover all of the areas within Metro Vancouver. During the training or the education that we will provide, we will focus on services and communities specific information for Metro Vancouver. Fact sheets would be another thing that we will try to develop as we go along. The second action item that the group came up with was the coordination of services. We felt that many groups were doing many of the work, but each one of us was working in isolation. So for us, I think it would be really good to support each other's work to do that. And for us, for each of the action items, when we form a working group, it would be from representatives who are from various communities within the Metro Vancouver region. What we will try to do is to identify services available to refugees, and with the inventory that we will prepare it with, the information collected would be based on established criteria, such as what services are available for refugees, whether they are free or whether they are community-based, and so forth. We will develop a refugee a networking meeting, and the networking meetings would include refugees, private sponsors, and we would invite the volunteers and any other settlement representative from settlement organization to these networking meetings. The purpose of the networking meetings would be to share information, to support each other's work, and hopefully it would create more opportunities for others to come forward to support refugees. The other item that was identified was employment. Many of the employers were asking many of the settlement organizations and working with refugees to refer clients to them, or they wanted to see what sort of profiles that they have. So we thought it's the group that came together thought that it's really important to try to develop information and come up with refugee profile for different communities, and to share this information with business and industry organization, and the information would be specific to the population skills, capabilities, their fit to enter the workplace. So we are hoping that the information would be specific to each of the community there. For the language training, we felt that it's really important for us to leverage on the work that Listen is doing and some other groups. The working group will try to identify and compile a list of inventory for community-based language services. Of course, non-LINC. LINC, which is the language instructions for newcomers to Canada. And for us, we will try to develop some. There has been many volunteer-run English classes that are running out there, but each of the volunteer groups are putting their own curriculum, and we thought it would be really important to have some guidelines of how to work with refugees, what would be the best practices to do that. And for us, we will do a research and a scanning of the available material that will work. And of course, we will try to look not to duplicate what's already available on Listen or BCTO or Tutela and the other resources that are available there. The other item was the healthcare. Our members felt that healthcare is one of the important aspects of the work, and it has to be a roadmap has to be prepared for to initiate a roadmap for healthcare services. And for us, it would be really good to come up with a printable and easy to read health map that refugees and organizations working with refugees can use together. And we are hoping at the end to translate the roadmap into Arabic for now, and if other languages are needed, we will consider those languages as well. So these are the action plans for our Metro Vancouver. I would really like you to continue connecting with us, to share information with us and identify if there are any issues that you want to raise to the members, or if you have any success stories or best practices or information that you want to share through to the various members on our team, we would be more than happy to get it from you. Thank you very much.